Hey folks, here at OS Reviews. You're watching our retro throwback review of the HTC Sensation. This phone came out in 2011, and back then it was a flagship for HTC and T-Mobile, selling for $200 with a 2-year service agreement, and it came with top-line specs for its time, inclusive of a Snapdragon S3 processor, which is dual-core clocked at 1.2 GHz and coupled with 768 megabytes of RAM. Flash storage was expandable via a card slot behind the cover, which we'll show you in a moment. There's also a 1520 mAh capacity battery, which was removable. Otherwise, other features included a 4.3-inch TFT LCD display with a 540 by 960 pixel resolution, so definitely not HD by today's standards, but good enough for its time, and it came with Android version 2.3, which is Gingerbread, and it had HTC Sense on top of that. The very top of the phone featured access to a front-facing camera, which is VGA quality, and also a loudspeaker in addition to a LED indicator light. And below here, we had access to capacitive controls for going home, going to the menu, back, and search, and these controls were also backlit. What's interesting about the display, which is made by Corning, is that it has a convex shape. So it's shaped almost like a bowl. It's the opposite of concave, for instance, displays, which you might see from other phones like the Galaxy S, maybe even the S7 Edge, or curved phones in 2016, where the edges kind of go off towards the outside. But here it's dipping onto the inside like a bowl, which makes for a very fluid and responsive experience when you're interacting with the overall touchscreen. So that's nice to note. Of course, HTC is infamous for its aluminum, premium, metal builds and finishes, and this phone is no exception. It feels extremely solid in the hand thanks to its curves as well as aluminum unibody build. What's also interesting about the design here is there were a few rubber accents made out of soft touch rubber that were injected into the metal mold. However, because it's soft touch rubber kind of degrades over time, it became very sticky, and in an attempt to remedy that, I decided to put a layer of moldable plastic on top of the soft touch rubber that was decaying. So I used Sagru, which is a clay based plastic that we also reviewed on this channel a few weeks back, so be sure to check that out, and hence why some of the accents here are going to be red as opposed to the original white or black, depending on the color scheme the phone originally had. So this is why the back here is a little bit customized. Otherwise, you can see here it does have a very premium build quality. The back had a 8 megapixel autofocus camera with dual tone LED flash, and also a rear facing speaker that was fairly loud as well. The sides here featured access to the micro USB port for charging, as well as an oversized volume rocker, which is tactile. And the top had access to the 3.5mm headphone jack, in addition to a power on-off switch. The bottom here is just really a lip for revealing the guts of the phone. And this was back in the days where HTC made this really interesting design where you could pop off the main frame from the kind of unibody metal here. So if we do a quick look and a quick demo of that, I guess, you can see that the plastic on the inside, including the circuitry, the battery, all the internals could be removed, leaving us with just a shell that was made completely out of aluminum, and there were a few contact points to ensure that everything was sealed properly. So if we take a quick look at just the shell of the phone, you can see that it leaves us on the back here with just the battery, in addition to the full-size SIM card slot and a microSD card slot for expanding the memory. And the battery here, it was a 1840 mAh capacity battery, also compatible with the Evo 3D, which is another phone that we did a review on a few years back, so be sure to check that on our channel if you haven't seen it already. Another very memorable and unique phone. So anyways, that's basically the hardware of the Sensation. Quite an interesting looking phone, very premium to feel, and similar as well to the HTC Amaze, which was a phone that kind of came out just a few months after the Sensation was released, and it was also a GSM quad-band world phone, so the two kind of competed there. However, both phones are excellent as far as the build as well as the general performance for the time. Powering things on, we're immediately greeted to the HTC Sense 3.0 user interface on top of Android 2.3 Gingerbread. It's the same custom overlay on top of Android we see from other HTC tablets belonging in the same era, such as the HTC Flyer that we did a retro review on a few months back. It's a pretty colorful user interface and gives you oversimplified icons that are easy to customize, and at the same time, it was one of our favorite skins back when Android was first introduced, just because it added a bit of utility and personality to Android. So here from the home screen, we can simply, rotate this ring to go into the main screen, or we can drag and drop quick shortcuts to the phone, to the mail, camera, or messages to jump right into those after I unlock the phone. You can see here that Sense does have a ton of animations, which doesn't prove to be too much of a hindrance, just because this is running on a decent processor and it has a little under 1 gig of RAM. So at the time, it was definitely sufficient for this operating system. And there's also this Leap view page, which you pinch out to look at all of your collective home screens, 7 here, so that you can customize with your favorite widgets and applications, many which have been inspired by HTC, such as this analog style clock that they designed starting in the days of Windows Mobile. So if we tap on the application shade, again, they have these really easy to use dragging menus down below here that tabs between multiple pages as a way to sort your applications. And they don't just extend here. Even if you open up other HTC design apps, such as the clock, you can even see the same design philosophy being used. So if we try to find that very quickly, again, you have access to the same bar down below for accessing things like the stopwatch, the alarm, so on and so forth. You'll notice some hiccup here and there just because, again, the device is showing its age and it's not quite the quad-core, octa-core devices we have today, which are instantaneous and super snappy. So as long as you're not doing too many apps open at the same time, it should still be serviceable for most basic tasks, such as browsing the web, making phone calls, doing a bit of light web browsing, so on and so forth. The screen, by the way, is gorgeous because it actually has a very bright and colorful saturation. Viewing angles are wide and generous. Obviously, it's not crystal clear in the sense that Full HD or 2K displays are, but it's more than sufficient for a 4.3-inch display, which again is a bit smaller than average phones are today. Taking a quick look at the camera next, I have to say that it's actually a pretty good camera for its time. It had an 8-megapixel autofocus sensor, and images were fast to be captured. The only limitation was really the memory, since HTC said that there were, quote, 4 gigs of built-in internal storage, but really less than 1 gig is available to the user after HTC Sense and the Android operating system are subtracted, meaning that you really do need to have your own memory card inserted behind here to access that functionality. The interface here is pretty simple. You can adjust things like ISO, geotagging, turning the grid on or off, self-timer modes, and of course record video or switch to the front-facing camera if you'd like, which actually is a surprisingly decent sensor as well that captures a nice amount of light, which is great for video chatting applications. In terms of applications on here, there are definitely some bloatware that have been installed by both HTC and T-Mobile. We see these in productivity areas such as with Adobe Reader, and there's also the Polaris Office, which allows you to open, edit PDFs as well as Word, Excel, and PowerPoint documents on the go, which makes this actually a pretty powerful productivity tool despite the lack of a physical keyboard. Other apps have been designed again by HTC, such as this oversized calculator. Also, their calendar application is pretty colorful and vivid as well, gives you notifications of what to do. And finally, there's also an FM radio if you want to plug in your own headphones. Otherwise, HTC has done you the service of installing very popular social media and messaging apps such as Facebook and Twitter right here. And of course, there's the standard array of Google apps, including Gmail and YouTube, that's been pre-installed by Google. But again, there is quite a clutter of applications, especially if you start scrolling down. You'll see that there's Slacker Radio, there's navigation, Telenav again, which is by T-Mobile. It's a paid turn-by-turn navigation service per month. There's also T-Mobile's own video chatting app and T-Mobile TV. So again, there's really quite a lot of things going on that you have to clean up yourself if you don't want to use all of these apps, since they do take up memory. Finally, there is a HTC staple, which is called Tester, and this really tests the accelerometer function of their phones. This phone does have a vibration sensor, so the phone will actually have haptic feedback when you have hit a wall in a game, or when you're actually tapping on a key or a button in the menu UI, which is actually pretty cool and gives you a bit more feedback when you're doing something. You can kind of hear that the speaker here is quite loud, and it does a decent job for playing back music as well as video clips. However, it's a little tinny once you turn the volume all the way up, so we do recommend plugging in a pair of headphones if you want the best audio quality. Otherwise, as a phone, it actually works quite well. You have the ability to make phone calls over Wi-Fi, so it doesn't cost you as much. It's a 4G device, one of the first ones that came out, and it was a flagship at the time. So phone quality here, really good, 3 to 4 bars of reception consistently around the Seattle region, and it uses a micro SIM card. Otherwise, if we jump into the web browser, it uses the standard WebKit-based browser that we saw. Pinch to zoom is pretty fluid and responsive, and pages automatically reflow for text to make things a bit more readable. Of course, desktop versions of sites will still load up just fine, but you have to be a bit more patient by the scale of maybe 2 to 3 seconds longer than your super fast flagship devices of 2016 and 2017, but it definitely still works and is, again, serviceable. You can get tab browsing, you can look at different windows, go through those, check out your bookmarks, and of course, if you don't like this browser, you could always download Chrome or a alternative through the Market, an earlier version of the Play Store as we know it today. So basically that's the HTC Sensation 4G, or a retro look back at this. Still actually a surprisingly usable phone, even though, again, we're now in 2017 almost, and this device actually still holds its own as far as main core functions, and it's still a very elegant and beautiful design. Only things that I don't really love is limited memory and the fact that it's a little smaller than your phones would want to be here in 2017. We really want 5-inch is kind of the sweet zone in my opinion, but this is still decent and the display is great. The slightly concurved design makes it very easy to hold, and battery life performance will last you for about 1.5 days since the screen is a little smaller, processor is not as intensive, so as long as you're not demanding or expecting the fastest phone in the world, it still is usable, especially for phone calls, basic text messaging, and for browsing the web. You can check out more details about this in our original review, but for now this has been our retro look back and retro review of the HTC Sensation 4G. Thanks for watching here at OS.